So many brave survivors sharing their stories this evening. And as we take a moment to process the stories that we've heard tonight, you may be thinking of questions you have. You may have questions for each of them as individuals or questions for us as an organization. So we'd like to give you time to ask those questions. I'm going to introduce now the panel of survivors that is comprised of survivors that were here last year at Empowered by Life, who have completed speaker training, our healing program, and they also are survivors. And so as they come up this evening, let's think of things that we can ask, things that we're curious about, things that we can share to just bring awareness to survivors. Since last year at Empowered by Life, this panel has gone on to create videos, commercials, interviews on major news outlets and podcasts, and speak in a variety of venues. This year, they've come back to answer your questions and share their combined knowledge. Please join me in welcoming the others to the stage. First up, we have Michelle Lyman. She discovered ASN at an Oregon Right to Life conference where she met Claire Caldwell, who was a guest speaker at the event. Michelle is an entrepreneur with several businesses. Priscilla Hurley is a health educator by profession, with over 40 years working in healthcare that affects women and families. She survived a D&C surgical abortion and has unique multiple experiences with abortion. She connected with ASN a couple of years ago and is serving as our community support specialist. She has 3 adult children, all married, 11 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. She and her family live in and around Anchorage, Alaska. Amy Miles is a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, lives in Oregon. She loves her family, the outdoors, and animals. She works as an occupational therapist in school, specializing in pediatrics. Amy survived a therapeutic abortion in 1980. She connected with ASN a couple of years ago and is entirely grateful for their support and guidance in her journey to share her story with others and be a voice for life. Mikaela Clay was abandoned at birth at a clinic after a failed abortion, believed to be a vacuum aspiration, along with her 2-year-old brother. Mikaela resides in Ohio with her husband of 24 years and 4 children. She works fervently as an advocate for children in foster care and stands firmly to save the lives of unwanted children across the globe. And tonight, we also have with us more survivors in the audience. So if you are a survivor, would you please stand? Guys, we have a family. Last but definitely not least, Melissa Oden. She is the founder and director of the Abortion Survivors Network. She is a survivor of a failed saline infusion abortion, but like every survivor, she is so much more than just a survivor. A true pioneer, Melissa is a frequent contributor to pro-life and conservative news outlets and a regular guest on radio and television programs around the world, including Fox News, Focus on the Family, Hannity, The Eric Metaxas Show, Huckabee, and more. Although Melissa's heart is for providing help and hope to all affected by abortion, she also strives to humanize the unborn through activism. She has testified before congressional committees numerous times, as well as lobbied and even met President Trump in the Oval Office in 2019. Fulfilling the purpose that she believes God set out for her when he saved her from the certain death of an abortion attempt, Melissa is truly a voice for the voiceless. So can we give Melissa a round of applause? Now, we would love to invite you to ask questions. If there's something you're curious about, ask questions. I'm going to come down to this mic right here, and I want to invite you to come up and ask questions, and Melissa is going to lead our panel in answering those for you.
Hello everyone, my name is Eileen, and I came to this last year. It was really awesome. curious. How is the Abortion Survivors Network educating doctors regarding abortion survivors?
That is such a great question, and thank you, first of all, for your vulnerability. If people know this about me, I don't like to cry, but I do. So there's no shame in that with me, and frankly, I feel like we live in a world that needs to be more vulnerable. And so your question is an important one. What are we doing to educate doctors about abortion survivors? Does anybody want to talk about any of the interactions that they have? And then I can talk a little bit about what we do from an organizational standpoint and where we're headed with some exciting things. I just know that as a survivor, it is really interesting, isn't it, to go to the doctor and have them read your medical records or be asked, why have you had shingles for the 12th time? And I'll have to say, oh yeah, funny thing about me. And there are some really interesting conversations that take place. Anybody else want to talk about the ones that they have?
So I can tell you that my doctor, very specifically, as I was growing up, they didn't use the term abortion. They used traumatic birth. I didn't understand what traumatic birth was until I was a lot older, and then you were able to put those two and two together and go, oh wow, this is what they were saying that whole entire time, because I was born so severely premature. I was missing the outer layer of my lungs. I didn't breathe properly. I had a lot of medical issues and curvature of the spine as well. But they always deemed it to be a traumatic birth. So doctors in general have taken it upon themselves to change what abortion really is, which is my mother did try to attempt to kill me in the womb. And because of that attempt, all these health issues followed, like a lot of us here. We all have a lot of health issues that came and stemmed from that birth.
I think you heard a little bit about it last year. Everybody tends to be very positive in their stories, which we want to be because our lives have beauty and there is such meaning and purpose to be found in them. But Mika is correct. I think everyone on this stage has, in some way, shape, or form, an invisible type of injury from the abortion that they survived, whether it's physical or mental. And I think your question is so important, though, about how are we educating medical providers? If you go out to the table later tonight, you'll see that we even have a new sign out there that speaks directly to pregnancy centers, medical professionals, people even in adoption agencies, just asking the question, you know, do you serve women who talk about experiencing a failed abortion? Do you serve women who go through abortion pill reversal? If so, we're here for her and for you as a professional and the children who survive. You know, it's so powerful to be living in this historic time where Roe has been overturned. But we know that we have not been talking about not only abortion survivors, but the women who experience failed abortions and those women who go through abortion pill reversals. You know, most survivors have talked about, if they know their biological mother, you know, some of the feelings and emotions their biological mother has gone through. That's something that we just haven't really even talked about in the pro-life movement during the time of Roe, is how do we serve women who have had a failed abortion or are carrying a child after a successful abortion pill reversal. So we are specifically going to be marketing over the course of starting really in the fall, the programs that we offer not only to abortion survivors, but to women who have had failed abortions. So Kira, who is our clinical social worker, who is very shy, I'll let you find her later. I won't make her raise her hand. You'll know who she is. We've adopted her into our survivor family. Kira serves those mothers who have experienced failed abortions and also the adoptive parents, and then also our young children who are survivors of abortion. So being able to market that information to pregnancy centers and medical professionals is a huge part of what we're going to be doing. And I have every hope that as we educate them about the services that we provide and why we even have to do that, we are going to be influencing those medical professionals who would otherwise be trying to tell survivors like Mika that this isn't really a thing. So you are going to see a lot more coming from us. You know, historically, we've been a fairly new organization, but we've grown very rapidly, and we're serving people that have never been served before in huge numbers. And so march in step with that. You will see us doing more than what we're even doing here tonight. We're excited about it. Other questions? Oh, there's a hand up in the back.
I'm not sure how to ask this question, so forgive me. I know of an elderly couple, and at one point they had shared with me that their daughter, who had triplets, that when she was pregnant, they knew that there was going to be some disability with one of them. And so, although the family was pro-life, quote unquote, she did go in to go have the abortion. But the two kids blocked the abortionist from being able to get to the one with the disability. And they kept trying to go around, and the two kept protecting their sister. I have no idea if this family knows about you guys, and I don't know what would be the best way to tell the grandma, who I'm friends with, about this. The kids are now adults, they're college age, and I would love to be able to share with this information, but I don't want it to be something where I just am bombarding them with something they're not ready for. So what can you suggest for me?
Did all three survive?
All three survived, and the two that protected the sister were not targeted. It was meant to be a reduction.
And they fought.
They protected their sister.
They fought
and
for their sibling in the womb.
And their
Anybody
sister
wanna
is
talk about that?
disabled, but, you know, obviously a survivor.
Harry might want to take this one. What a great question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that, you know, a disability isn't definitive of a bad life, or that just because you have a disability, you're not gonna, you know, or announce anything. You know, there are some great people that have gone on that are with disabilities, and they're doing great things. So I don't think, you know, we can ever discredit someone just because they have a disability.
And being a survivor of a possible twin, it touches my heart that the siblings fought for the third.
I want to add one thing. All three of them are athletes. The one who was targeted just happens to use a wheelchair.
Wow.
Isn't that, did everybody hear her? So even the child who was targeted for abortion is an athlete and uses a wheelchair. And that's the tough thing, isn't it? I mean, I'll kind of kick this off and then I'll open this up to you guys. But what you are talking about is so common in families after there's been an attempted abortion. We don't want to talk about it. I mean, I was just talking about this in an interview the other day. There was a mom that I met last fall who was parenting her 4-year-old preschooler who survived a dioxygen shot to the heart. How did he survive? We'll probably never know. But what I do know is that she is so deeply afraid of him finding out what she tried to do. And that night when I met with her, I was able to explain to her, as hard as this is for you right now, I can tell you that there is a part of him that already wonders why he feels different. And I can say that because we hear it time and time again. Survivors will say, I never understood why I don't fit in, why I feel so alone, why I'm rejected. And when a survivor finds out that there was something external that led to that happening, it takes away that internal pain. It doesn't take it away completely, but it does take it from outside themselves of, oh gosh, there was something so different about me. I'm the only triplet with a disability, right?
Yes.
It moves away from that place of, well, why am I the one? Why am I the only one with a disability? Well, from what you're saying, they weren't given that disability from the abortion attempt, but they were targeted because of it.
Correct.
And so there is some perspective to be given when you say, you know what, you are such a miracle. And you are alive because your siblings protected you. And so it's tough because you want that family to be able to share this incredibly beautiful story that helps them understand just how important their bond is. What a special trio of people they are. So I don't know if any of you guys want to talk about breaking through family secrets.
Probably all could do that, but I would love to meet them because I bet those two that protected are just fiercely protective of that one still. But yeah, I think it's hard to break through the secrets. I know that my mom finally told me at the age of 19, but she carried that for all those years and never talked about it really unless I asked her questions. And it was a secret from even her husband that she was married. So
I think, Robin, you can probably talk to this too. A lot of times people will try to say, and I heard some giggles tonight when people would say, right, well, so-and-so said, I should just forget it and move on. We laugh nervously about that because of how comfortable it is, but I can tell you that most families probably think, nobody else knows about it. They are just fine. We're just going to move on. But there's not always a lot of moving on.
So the thing that keeps the families locked in those patterns, trying to keep those secrets, is, of course, shame. The antidote to shame is sharing your story. That's why we do this. That's why it's so important that you do talk. That's why it's so difficult to get past that. But I can tell you, once you do open that door, it does feel a little bit like you're opening Pandora's box. And if you want to go to our website, abortionsurvivors.org, you'll find some materials that are free. You can download and print them. They can give you some guidelines about talking about it. They can give you some guidelines and resources to helping kind of craft that conversation. And we've created those because we've noticed the need. When you start to peel back that shame, you'll find the people that were hiding behind it want to talk about it the most, but they hurt so bad. They're so afraid of being exposed, of feeling the pain, and of being rejected. They don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to handle the pain. And so one of the things you may have heard from all of us who spoke tonight was this heart to forgive our birth mothers. The birth mothers need to know that they're forgiven. That is another very key component. So when you're talking about talking to the family, I would encourage you to just, think about where is forgiveness in this and how can we rally around the birth mother and the decision to make that that child singled out because they, were potentially going to be aborted. Look at where does forgiveness come into that piece, because that is so crucial for mom and for those children to hear and be a part of that decision. We all carry a heart to forgive our birth moms because we know it starts to peel that layer back. And we know that as we start to talk about it and as we start to go out and share our story, that shame piece starts to deflate and that fear of rejection really starts to diminish. And so the birth mom's feeling that. She's probably got other people in the family that were a part of that decision. And so what we find is that those family secrets that are hiding in that shame, they start to be dismantled by the forgiveness and sharing your story vulnerably in a safe place and knowing that that's not going to be an easy conversation. Lean into it. Rest in the fact that Daddy God's got this. And you know what? At the end of the day, when you do work through that conversation, and it's kind of like a pinprick to a balloon, that's all going to start to deflate, and then the really important conversations can come after that.
Well, and I think, I've often joked, abortion survivors are really good conversation starters. If you're not sure how you're going to talk to somebody about it, you can just say, right, I went to this event the other night, and the stories stuck with me in such a big way, and it reminded me a little bit about what I've heard from you. And I want you to know that your family isn't alone in what you've gone through. I mean, that is just like, boom, ground zero, step one. And let them know that they can always come to you with more questions or find out more about us. And as we're evolving and finding these huge gaps that have never been served in the pro-life movement, what you're going to see on our website within the next 6 months is specific information, even more clear for those women who have had failed abortions, more clear for extended family members, to have those questions answered for them. So we're going to become an even greater resource for you all. But yeah, don't be afraid to use this as a conversation starter. Thank you for that great question. That's a beautiful story.
Hi, I'm Judy. And first of all, I want to say thank you all for your courage and for your vulnerability, because these stories need to be heard in the rest of the pro-life community, so thank you. And my question is this: have any of you had siblings who were aborted, either before or after you, successfully? And if not, do you have siblings who were not aborted? And what was that relationship like once you found out your story? Thank you.
Well, my story involves the generational trauma of abortion. My mother tried to abort me. I was the 5th of 6 children. I have 4 sisters, and we've all experienced having our own abortions. Many of my sisters. So there's that generational piece, and I kind of am convinced that there needs to be a break in that cycle of generational trauma and the generational incidence of abortion. In pregnancy resource centers, how do you break that cycle? Do you even know if those girls that are coming in, if their moms had abortions? Those would be good questions to ask. So in my case, my mother, I was the only one, but she lost a twin, my twin. I kind of get choked up with that because it explains some of what I had to live with as a child. And when I found out at 19, I was so relieved because I thought, oh, I'm not crazy. There was a reason I've been feeling so many things that I felt as a child. But that's what I have to say. So.
In my family, my oldest brother is 18 years older than I am, and my birth mom was an alcoholic, and there was always talk that there were abortion attempts or completed abortions between him and I. So in those 18 years, there were possible aborted siblings, and being one of the ones that made it is incredibly humbling. And definitely something that I'm still working through and processing, but can be incredibly difficult knowing that there's possible siblings out there that, I never got to meet and never got to live life like I have.
So on the other side of those things, I was abandoned with my brother, who was 2 years old. But then we found my birth mother just a couple of years ago. She had passed by the time that I found her, but she also had 4 other children after she had attempted to abort me. So one of the questions that I had, and I still have, obviously I'm not going to get the answer to that, was why me? Why did he get to live? Why did they get to live? why did you choose me to not want to be here? My older brother is very supportive of me, but he doesn't talk about his past traumas. He doesn't talk about our adoption. He doesn't talk about really what I've gone through. And my new siblings, because we've just met each other last year, it's a very sensitive subject because this is a mother that loved them, that cared for them, took them to school, and was an amazing grandmother. And here I have this aspect that they didn't know, which was my survival. So with all of those things being said, I think all of us can kind of testify to the fact that it can be chaotic, and it just depends on that individual of how they're going to take it and what they're going to take from it.
Good question.
Hello. Thank you so much for your testimonies. It just goes to show you, how much y'all are needed to be unveiling the curtain of darkness that is a lot, over a lot of people's that deny your existence. And we had the unfortunate pleasure today to testify in front of our Austin City Council, who recently passed something called the GRACE Act, which is an acronym for guarding the right to access abortion. I should have remembered it. But yeah, just from the council members and saying what they are doing, what they're supporting, alluding to using city funds to fly out their city employees to states that allow this atrocity. My question is to y'all, and this is in relation to maybe your experiences testifying for the Born Alive Protection Act in Texas. What do you say to those people that look down and deny or don't want to look you guys in the eyes?
I'll let Melissa take this one. She knows that feeling very well, right?
Sure thing. Testifying. Yeah. So they don't want to look us in the eye because we are the truth that unravels their lies. It's very, very difficult for us to come up here and share in front of a friendly audience. Imagine what it's like for us to testify, and the very next person that's going to speak is a bigwig with Planned Parenthood who comes and says, oh, they're not a thing. That's not real. They want you to believe a fairy tale. And they get twice or more the amount of time to talk as you do. And we get choked down to tiny little bits of time. The struggle is real. And so when we testify for Born Alive legislation, as I did for bill in Virginia this year, as Melissa was talking about, it is very challenging for us because it's so deeply personal. But then you kind of get treated as chattel a little bit. So it is very challenging. When they don't look at us, it just reinforces we need to be there. The fight is on, and it is a very spiritual battle. And the feelings that we get in rebuttal, it's visceral. So would you pray for us? Would you pray for us that more survivors will want to come forward, even in the midst of going into the lion's den a little bit? And would you commit to praying for us, especially as those bills go out? We would love to have a federal Born Alive bill go through, but we're looking currently at states as well. And so when we testify and we know they won't look us in the eye, it's because they can't handle the truth. We are the absolute nightmare that will unravel all of the things that they're trying to stand on and say that we are not a thing. And so that's why it's so important that we tell you, as Kim did in her talk and that Melissa did in her video, about the statistics and the numbers that say there are tens of thousands of us. It's important that you guys hear that there are tens of thousands of us. We're not some one-off, but we know our whole lives, we've been told we're alone. Most of us have spent most of our lives feeling like we were the only one, and they want that lie to continue. Every year when we come back and you see more and more of us on this platform, that's because the kingdom of heaven is advancing a little bit in truth in that department.
I'm going to talk about Born Alive policy, and then I want to talk about Representative Nancy Mace's Standing with Moms Act. If anybody saw that last week, Representative Nancy Mace introduced that. It's an important bill in terms of really encouraging and advancing support for women like our biological mothers who should have been given true resources and support and not pushed to abort. But what I love in the midst of that bill is you're going to find a lot of language that talks about failed abortions, even after chemical abortions. And I talk about that because I know this is the world that we're now living in, where with Roe falling and we see chemical abortions being pushed more and more, what I can tell you is that we are seeing more and more children surviving not just APR, but both chemical abortion pills. I know them because they show up in our inbox on a weekly basis. Earlier this spring, I got to hold one of those babies. He was 13 months old at the time that I got to see him at a pregnancy center. And some of you probably hear the same stories that we do. This little guy's mom went to the pregnancy center, received all of her information, and still went to the abortion clinic. Was less than 10 weeks pregnant at the time. Took both chemical abortion pills, and of course the pregnancy center didn't know it. They didn't know because she never returned. But months later, she reached out to them and said, you know what, all these months I've kept feeling like there's something still going on with me. I feel like maybe I could still be pregnant. She had been calling Planned Parenthood, and they kept telling her, there's nothing wrong. You're fine. She went back to that pregnancy clinic, and they did an ultrasound and found out she was nearly full term. Praise God that Planned Parenthood didn't want to talk to her. And praise God that she knew that she had a relationship with that pregnancy center, people who would love her and care for her. So she gave birth to this little boy who survived both chemical abortion pills and was placed for adoption. I hear stories like his now every single day. Now, it's important from the standpoint of chemical abortion, but it's also really important when it comes to abortion survivors. And this makes sense through the lives of one survivor who isn't on the stage with us, but you might have seen her earlier this year. She was on the Ingram angle after she had also been present with Governor DeSantis for his bill signing. We had 2 abortion survivors there at that bill signing. You are starting to see survivors in many, many places, because when we're healed and empowered and equipped and we start to use our voice, then we can help survivors be involved in those kind of opportunities. But I want to share a little bit about Hope's story with you so you can understand the gap that exists in Born Alive legislation as we now have it. Hope was the survivor that was there with another one of our survivors with Governor DeSantis. Hope survived a D&C abortion that was performed at 10 weeks. Like many women, she believed that the abortion had been successful. The medical professionals believed that the abortion had been successful. And months later, she had the same familiar pangs. There's something different about me. She had already had children before Hope, so started to figure out that she knew what this was. Went back to the doctor, and of course, they learned that Hope was still in the womb. Hope was ultimately born prematurely with significant head injuries. If you see Hope, you will see she has a huge scar and gash in her forehead. When she was born prematurely, her scalp was peeled back. She has significant disabilities because of that D&C abortion. So Hope was aborted unsuccessfully at 10 weeks and then was carried to about 28 weeks. Do you think that with current Born Alive legislation and reporting standards, we're catching a life like Hope's? Joe, I know you know the answer just like I do. We aren't. Because there is no reason or incentive or the abortionist to report that there was a failed abortion at 10 weeks that is resulting in a live birth at 28. And that's what we're seeing in those chemical abortions. 8, 10 weeks, chemical abortion pills are taken. Baby is then carried to full term, and they're not being identified. That's a concern not only from a legislative standpoint, but certainly it is a concern for caring for that child, and it's about concern for caring for that mother. You know, the abortion industry sadly tells women that there isn't going to be any kind of effects for taking those chemical abortion pills at home, alone, no care. And so if those women are not being cared for in the midst of taking abortion pills and carrying a pregnancy, then the medical provider should be concerned about that. So that's where you're also going to see us heading. We are a huge part of federal legislation that we are attempting to introduce and really shape when it comes to born alive reporting. Because as we then report accurate numbers, we will be able to protect survivors in a much greater way. And one of the coolest things you're going to see us put out very soon is from a policy intern. And she ran numbers based on the models of countries like Canada in particular, who do report out their abortion survivors. Now, do I think those numbers are 100% correct? No, of course not. They're underreported. But what I can tell you is that based on her model, when she compared Canada's failed abortion rate to that of the United States and compared it to population and everything, I can tell you that the number of abortion survivors is likely much greater than that 17,000 number that you saw on the screen. It is the most beautiful piece of analysis I have ever seen anybody do when it comes to abortion survivors. So we are going to be launching that with some policymakers before we then share that with the greater public. But I know, Joe, that is something that I definitely want you in particular to see.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome to Austin. I'm Heather. I first of all want to thank you and encourage you as a network, as a group, and individually too, if you have social media, please, please, please keep sharing all of this information. Anytime you have public videos of you testifying, especially juxtaposing it next to the Planned Parenthood rep, then going on for several more minutes and denying, but just keep on sharing that, because that's really what's getting to a lot of the younger generations. And when you just show them right then and there, I think that's going to help change a lot of hearts, but also prevent a lot of younger folks from going in the wrong direction, of going down that path of the dark side, essentially. Tell us about, my question is, tell us about, I'm hearing new phrases lately, two in particular that I've heard more recently. One of them I heard in a documentary, more euphemisms than code words for abortion. We can't say abortion anymore, it's too controversial. So now we're saying advanced contraceptive methods is one that I've heard very recently. And also, somebody said part of one today, therapeutic procedures. We had a volunteer that actually just recently reached out to us and said, I'm so upset. My doctor asked me today if any of my non-viable pregnancies were therapeutic procedures, and I had no idea what she was talking about, and I had to ask her to clarify. And then she said, we don't want to use the abortion because we don't want them to feel like they're being judged. So can you tell us about that and how we can combat that?
So the abortion procedure that I survived was a therapeutic. The notes that I have in the record say therapeutic abortion, but I can tell you that I think that that's a umbrella term to make abortion sound more palatable for medical providers, easier to write, but I think, I don't know the specifics of my actual abortion, but I can tell you that I'm an adult woman that lives with cerebral palsy, and whatever happened during that procedure, it was not palatable to me or anybody else that has to go through that, or my birth mother. So I think therapeutic abortion is a nice way to wrap it up in a bow so that doctors have something that they can say. But really, I think that's a blanket term.
So all of those terms, like therapeutic abortion, obviously are something that they want to mask the truth of everything that's going on in our country right now. One of the big things that we've talked about that I think that our communities are seeing is just misinformation, period. People are being told that ectopic pregnancies are abortion. People are being told that they're going to have a time gap so that abortion still needs to be legal, because that time gap is going to be dangerous to those women because they're not going to be able to get that abortion if they're having an ectopic pregnancy. And I say to them, if you go to a hospital with a gunshot wound, they're not going to stop and not treat your gunshot wound because they need to call the legislators and the senators in your county and in your state to make sure that you can be provided care. They're going to provide the care in emergent situations. It's not therapeutic. There's no therapy involved in having an abortion. It's the opposite of that.
Words are powerful. And we've seen that they've used words to keep abortion legal for 50 years. But you know what? Stories are more powerful. And we need more people to share their story and their truth.
I have to say that part of my testimony is I not only was a family planning educator, but I also worked in the abortion industry, and we used therapeutic abortion, TAB. That was what they came in for. And it's a justification to what they're doing. But the part about saying advanced contraception just makes me laugh, because it's, this whole realm is materialistic physicality, and we are not just physical beings. We are spiritual beings. We have an emotion and a heart and a mind. And so everything is relegated to that lower place in this industry, in this whole dynamic that's going on. So keep standing up for the truth. This is our testimony, and we will continue to speak out the truth. And I thank you for bringing that up, Heather. That just is, like you say, words are powerful.
And of course, I want to joke and say, so does that mean we have to change our name?
Yes. Therapeutic Procedure Survivors?
Right, the Therapeutic Procedures Network. Cool. You heard it all first. Thanks, Heather.
That's expensive. You have to donate now. They're going to be a donation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here so much, and thank you for sharing your stories. They were just beautiful. And, the evil one wants you to keep all that suppressed and feel that shame and so you sharing that is, and I've seen a few speakers, abortion survivor speakers through the years, but I learned a lot tonight. And one of the things that, and my name's Katrina, by the way, I don't think I said that. One of the things that was really eye-opening to me was the nightmares that you share, that you've had. Is that something that you hear often? And is there a common thread once people come forward of, I just wanted to know about that, because that's fascinating.
Praise God for the nightmares, because that brought the truth out eventually.
Yes.
You want to talk any more about your campaign?
I don't know how to address how many of us will have these nightmares or had these nightmares. I will address my situation. If I didn't have that nightmare, I would not know today what happened. And God knew that, because my mother grew up losing her father at 7, and nobody told her. Nobody told her. She grew up in a family that didn't talk about things. So she didn't feel comfortable talking about the darkest secret she had. We all have them. Until God, I believe, brought us these dreams to speak truth to us. And like I said, when I heard that my mother almost had me aborted, I wasn't devastated. It was such a relief to hear the truth, and I knew what I had been dealing with for, 15 years? That's such a relief. So I also want to say, we all have our dark areas of our lives that we don't want to talk about. We put them in a box. I promise you something. They grow. They get bigger than they should. They take more control. And they take a big piece of your life. I'm watching it right now in my mother. It's heartbreaking. And I encourage you, because you all have a story. Someday maybe we'll be sitting in that audience, listening to your story.
And I think I'm reminded of the movie Silent Scream and how you could see the baby was aware of what was going on in that horrible film. And I think about the triplets that we just learned about tonight. And so when I heard this story for the first time this weekend of these survivors that had dreams, that just makes me just more, it just is amazing that, we're spirit first and then we're body, but these babies know what's going on. The babies were aware.
About having the dreams before you even knew why you were having the dreams of the abortion attempt. So just how amazing it is. It's like, what,
Yeah, it is very amazing because you find out a part of something and you're so spiritual. And when I was young, I was like, I don't know what I'm dreaming. But when I got older and prayed more, those things started to make sense. And it was the realization that that baby was me. And so those dreams were powerful, very powerful.
And one other thing I'd like to share is that when I did the workbook that Melissa put out on the healing workbook, it talks about how even though we might forget any kind of trauma that our body has experienced, our body remembers. And so that just kind of, these babies remembered that trauma, even though they had no way of knowing about it.
Katrina, to answer that from kind of an organizational perspective, do we see this often? Yeah, we actually do. I mean, I would say in upwards of 60 to almost 70% of survivors will contact us and talk about some kind of dreams, nightmares. For me, I didn't have those, but my parents always say that from the moment they got me from the NICU, I would curl up in the fetal position. And I can still remember that about myself growing up. I was always, wrapped up in that fetal position. And so knowing what I know now, working with our population, I also know that what that is about for me too.
There's another question.
Hi, ladies, and thank you once again. You were not an accident. You were planned. The Lord knew you before you were in your mother's womb, and you all know that, right? You all know that, and I'm very proud of all of you. My question is how we deal with the secular world who don't know Jesus, who don't understand that we were all created for a reason. I was recently in a group where I actually announced that I was coming tonight to the Abortion Survivors Network event in Austin, Texas. And the people's jaws just dropped. Like, what? And out of the blue, one of the elderly men looked at me and he said, well, now, it's okay. They're just a ball of flesh. It's okay. And I was appalled, and I looked straight in his eyes and I said, I totally disagree with you. That baby begins at conception. That's a baby. So my question to all of you is, we're dealing with a lot of people, like half the people in our country believe that that little ball of flesh is not a baby, so therefore it can be aborted. So therefore when they vote pro-choice. How do we get through to those people that that they're wrong? Thank you.
Great question. And I've actually been kind of coming up with strategy as far as how to talk with people without using my Christianese words, right? Because for us as believers, it's very easy to say, well, God created us. It really comes down to value of life. You know, who are we to say whether my life or Kim's life is worthy to live or worthy not to live, right? Most of these people who have an issue with us speaking against abortion have been given the chance to live. So I feel that they come from a very biased position in the first place, right? So if we really just bring it down to that very simple level, take out the extra stuff, what is the value of life? And ask them, what is the value of your life or those you love?
I know you all way better. I know you all have a response.
Kim, your story said it all, though. Right? Kim's story about her journey.
I was just going to add to that, now that we're living in a post-Roe world, we need to start really talking about what we can do to surround these mothers and babies with support. Currently, nationwide, we have about 3,000 pregnancy resource centers who are there to give support to mom and baby far beyond the birthday. And I'm adopted, and I feel so blessed to be adopted. But that's another thing that, the other options, that's something that I think needs to be talked about. There's about 36 couples waiting for every one child that's placed for adoption. So I just think bringing back the humanity of what abortion is and that baby, but also what are the other options, what can we do? We need to start thinking about building that up.
I like what you're talking about, Amy, which is finding a place where you can come to a consensus, right? And that's part of this. We're not, saying that we don't have to shine a light on the dignity and value of every human life made in the image and likeness of God. But what it means is that we know when we're talking to certain people, we need to try to find a common place where we can have a conversation about something. They may not agree on a matter of faith, but maybe they can agree when Amy talks about adoption. They can agree about the resources and support that exist for people. So that's always a good rule of thumb too when you're having those conversations.
Hi, my name is Braden. It's obviously important that the pro-life movement gets your stories out there. I'm curious to hear how the media has treated you all and y'all's stories. There's a lot in the media who obviously don't want y'all's stories to be heard. So how do you confront that, and what has your experience been with the media?
I don't know, Amy. I feel like you should talk about this. So Amy shared her story last year at our first Empowered by Life, and then Amy kind of had a busy fall. Amy took part in one of the Susan B. Anthony List ads that they did related to the Dobbs case. So Amy was a part of history. Hello. And why don't you tell people your very first interview? Whose show were you on?
I was on Spicer & Co., and since then I've been on Fox and Friends for a Mother's Day and other survivors. So, I just think there's something about the truth, and I think all of us up here and the world needs to see and hear the truth. And so that resonates for me in my story. I think I would love to see every national media coverage hear our stories, because I think they're amazing and there's so much depth to them. So it's my hope that that media presence for us and the Abortion Survivors Network will grow with time, especially since we have survivors reaching out every day, it seems like. And with the post-Roe world, this work will continue. We need to continue to share our stories and continue to shed a light in a place that's, there's a lot of misinformation, like Mika said. There's a lot of things being said, and there's a lot of questions being thrown at us, and we need to continue to tell our stories and share hope and healing and grace and love.
They like to call me the trailblazer, so I'll own it for a little bit tonight. I wasn't a trailblazer, I was making a path. So maybe those are the same things, I don't know. For me, certainly I've been doing this for about 15 years, so I've had a lot of interactions with the media. You know, this one that I had recently, I think you guys will probably get a little bit of a laugh out of. From the policy side of things, I've been working on the Kansas Value Them Both Amendment, which is the first ballot initiative post Roe falling. Certainly had no intention or there was no way for anybody to know that this is how this would play out. But August 2nd is the vote in Kansas, which, a vote yes would allow Kansans to then have the state constitution amended, signifying that there's no right to abortion in the Constitution, and they could therefore have their elected officials passing pro-life laws. Right now, every law in Kansas is deemed unconstitutional on its face because in 2019, their activist Supreme Court found this right to abortion that existed that allowed them to overturn the dismemberment abortion ban in Kansas. It also then allowed them to find clinic regulations and inspection also to be unconstitutional. That was overturned in late 2021. So that's what Kansas has been living with, is that every single pro-life law, when it's challenged, can be found unconstitutional and overturned. I have been working on that behind the scenes more than publicly, which is a lot of fun for me. I have a lot of fun in strategy, as you have started to probably figure out. But now that we're in this phase of the amendment, the national media turned their attention on Kansas once Roe was overturned. So, Huffington Post and Vice and WAPO and ABC News and CNN and you fill in the blank, and they're all coming to Kansas. And go figure, they find out that I'm there. There's an awful lot of people who are now very interested in talking to me, not because I'm an abortion survivor, simply because of the amendment in and of itself. And so that's been very interesting to find what the media will actually cover. Keep your eyes on ABC News as August 2nd gets close, though, because I did do an interview with ABC News. They had met with another one of the Value Them Both team members, and this is when it gets fun with the media. They knew ahead of time who I was. They had been pitched my story for an interview. And when it came time to interviewing me that day, one of the staff kept saying, gee, look at the time. I don't think we have time to interview her. We need to go. And of course, the other staff would say, no, I think we're good. We've got time. She was showing us, where on the GPS to get to the airport. No, I am pretty sure we don't have time for her. Oh, but they did. Ultimately, they did. So we'll see. The ball is in their court. If they choose to include that interview, that would be really interesting to me if they do that. And I think it's a really good test for where we're at with the media right now. If somebody like ABC News can actually breathe that somebody survived an abortion, I have a lot of hope what's going to come the rest of the year.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name's Katie, and in a lot of the stories, I heard a lot of you guys talk about when you were first told that you were a survivor, and some of you found out fairly young, and for some of you that was the first time you heard what abortion was. And I know there's a lot of pro-life parents who are struggling with how to talk to their children about abortion, and I heard a lot of examples of how not to explain to a child what abortion is, but if you guys have some insights, being survivors and having had those conversations with family members, what would you recommend to pro-life parents that are trying to explain this to their children?
I didn't make her raise her hand, but everybody meet Kara, our clinical social worker. What's worse than raising your hand coming on stage? amazing job. I'm loud, you know that. Kira does the most amazing job helping biological parents and adoptive families set the stage for how to even tell their surviving child that they survived an abortion. And the ground level of that is even talking about abortion and survivors. So I would love for you to share your wisdom.
Well, thank you. And I am sorry, I'm clearly not dressed for this tonight.
She's been driving us all around. She's good.
There are actually quite a few wonderful resources out there that Focus on the Family has put out of how to speak with your child about the topic of abortion, what abortion is, but really most importantly of all, it really dives into the dignity and value of life. And so there are a lot of photos that you can find online that show babies in the womb that really emphasize the dignity and value of all life. So that's where I kind of start with a lot of the families that come to us, is just give them these visual resources to share with their children. Children are so visual. That's kind of how they understand things, is through pictures and simple words. And Focus on the Family does so well with that. I don't know if that answers that. But.
Anybody else want to add to that? Yeah, you're right. We are often, our stories are filled with what not to do. But what I love is that because of Kira, someday you guys are going to have a stage filled with survivors who she helped serve, who are going to say, listen, as hard as it was to find out my story, can I tell you that my parents did a great job? And that's because of Kira. We had a little 10-year-old who Kira worked with recently, and actually we had two 10-year-olds in the face of Roe being overturned that we got to send gift boxes to. And one of those was told her story for the first time, raised by her biological mom, after Kira had been working with them and setting that stage.
This next generation of abortion survivors will find out, hopefully, a lot easier than we all did. You guys, thank you so much for your questions tonight. Thank you for hanging out with us this long and listening, and just for your time and what you're doing, because I know that each of you, if you're here tonight, you're doing something to promote life and to empower life. So thank you so much. Thank you for all your good questions. Tonight, as you can see, this organization is so busy. We are very, very busy doing a lot for survivors. And so what I want to encourage you to do, if you feel led, is to partner with us. Will you help us fill the gap? Will you help us to empower more survivors, provide healing and equipping as they use their voice out in the world? We are the only organization in the world that serves abortion survivors. Isn't that amazing? And we would love to invite you to just partner with us. There's a QR code up on the screen. If you point your camera and just tap on the little yellow bar that comes up, it'll take you to our donation page. And whether you decide to donate one time or to donate recurring, we just want to thank you so much for your partnership. We get to humanize the unborn like no one else. And so thank you so much for making that happen. Thank you for your time tonight. It is our hope that you've learned a little bit more about abortion survivors, our network, and our cause for life. We'd love to connect with you. We're going to be out in the foyer for a little bit. So if you have more questions, come on out, shake everyone's hand, and we'd love to meet you. Thank you again to New Life for hosting us, and for each of you for attending tonight. Thank you so much.